Amazing discovery. 3 children push grandma down, then Jesus reveals a surprising transformation. The backyard was a cacophony, a sunlit tableau of laughter, the sizzling grill, and the impatient clamor of a family reunion. Sarah felt her heartbeat quicken as the chaos enveloped her, sensing the burdens of expectation settling like a weight on her shoulders. She was a nurse, a healer, but today she felt lost amidst her demanding family, whose formless expectations clouded her every breath. A playful ruckus erupted, and before long, her 3 mischievous cousins became the centerpiece of a crisis. The moment blurred into slow motion. Their elderly grandmother stumbled, then tumbled down the wooden porch steps. Gasps filled the backyard. The air thickened with blame and chaos. "What were you thinking?" shrieked Sarah's uncle, a flush of panic broiling his face. The cousins tangled in their claims of defense, confusion swirling like a tornado. Sarah could feel the familiar strain knotting her stomach, caught between being a dutiful daughter and a protective nurse. Suddenly, her family's tensions mirrored the relentless stress of her job, demanding, suffocating, and impossible to escape. She was the one everyone leaned on, yet felt like a ghost among them, trapped in roles she never chose. "Focus," she thought as she rushed to her grandmother's side, a frightened glimmer still in her grandmother's eyes, a reminder of the love and strength she had shown Sarah all her life. In the chaos, an unexpected peace enveloped her. It was the tenderness in her grandmother's voice that drew her back, guiding her through the storm. "Don't let their blame become yours," her grandmother whispered, words wrapping around Sarah's fraying heart. "There's freedom in the truth, child." Then came the revelation. Behind her grandmother's misty eyes, stories urged to be spoken, tales of a long-lost art studio that had belonged to their ancestors. It shone brightly in Sarah's mind, a forgotten legacy to which she felt an irresistible pull. There was healing in those dusty stories. But the pressure was overwhelming as she grappled with her family's expectations against her own burgeoning passion for art. The art she had suppressed since childhood, replaced with obligations and resentments. That night, Sarah settled in front of her easel. There, she began to paint, colors unleashed, emotion spilled onto the canvas. Brushstrokes became her release, her soliloquy. Yet anxiety gnawed at her. With each stroke, shadows of doubt whispered that she was defying her family, straying from their narrative. The weight of their collective shame pressed heavily on her as night crept on. Whatever identity she might forge felt like a betrayal to her past. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Her newfound mentor, a grizzled artist from down the street, appeared in the periphery, pulling her further into an exploration that felt so raw yet entirely precarious. His rough edges reassured her, igniting a flicker of hope. But the paradox tightened around her throat like a noose. Would this journey lift her or drown her in the murky waters of family expectations? Each brushstroke reflected her growing independence, yet shadows of fear loomed closer. When whispers of the annual town art display floated in, it was a storm front threatening to unravel everything. Could she present her voice to the world, a voice laden with scars, or would she expose the family disgrace they had buried deep? As she painted through the nights, her thoughts surged, the pulse of memories twisted alongside her aspiration. Would acceptance stand at the end of this brushstroke adventure, or must she relinquish a part of herself for familial love? The answer eluded her, but as the sun set and the colors began to dance across her canvas, she felt the pressing question, now more agonizing than ever. Could she truly balance her devotion to her family with the need to discover who she was before the shadows of history enveloped her completely? The next morning broke with a soft light filtering through the trees, a stark contrast to the storm clouds gathering in Sarah's heart. As she stood before the canvas, her paintbrush poised midair, doubt clawed at her thoughts. The vision of the art display loomed ominously, an event that was supposed to be a doorway to transformation, but instead felt more like a precipice over which she might tumble. Each color she had mixed reflected a piece of her, vibrancy tinged with shadows. Dip after dip, she tried to channel the harmonious legacy her grandmother had hinted at, yet each stroke felt intertwined with the guilt of betrayal. Who would she be without her family's approval? A shiver ran down her spine. It was a question she could hear whispered in the corners of her mind, echoing her uncle's earlier outburst of panic. The day dragged on without resolution as she returned to the nursing ward, donning her scrubs, ready to step back into the patient-centered world that felt so comfortable yet suffocating. Interactions with patients brought joy, but also served as a reminder of the burdens she carried. The line between healing others and healing herself was increasingly blurred. It was here, among the sterile walls and the soft beeping of machines, that she felt the gravitational pull of her dual life. "Are you okay, Sarah?" her colleague Jenna asked, a keen observer of the subtle shifts in people's moods. "You seem miles away." Sarah forced a smile, the automatic response she had perfected. "Just a lot on my mind," she replied, but inside, the turmoil raged. She stole the briefest glimpse at the hall where patients chatted, exchanged stories, and somehow managed to find joy in fragility. Here was an unintentional mirror of her struggle, these people seeking comfort while she was paralyzed by uncertainty. That evening, determined to confront her fears head-on, Sarah returned to her easel. Each color imbued with purpose, she allowed her emotions to spill over with fervor, seeking not perfection but truth. The swishing sound of the brush ignited a resolve deep within her. Unconsciously, she began layering the canvas in an expressionist style, fragments of her inner struggle blurring into abstract forms. Doubt flickered in and out like the rhythm of her breath, but something about the chaotic energy of her process felt liberating. It screamed life, a stark contrast to the rigid expectations of her family, a cacophony waiting to find its melody. "Reconnect," she urged herself. With each stroke, she chose to reconnect with the little girl who loved to paint, less concerned with others' judgments, because she had something to say, finally. As the colors blended, she began to recall the stories her grandmother shared, of the ancestors who had lived richly in creativity. They hadn't hidden their talents. Instead, they wore them as armor. The thought ignited purpose in her hands, and she continued painting late into the night. But just as she added the final layer, a timid knock on her studio door shattered her concentration. It was her mother, concern etched across her features. "Sarah, we need to talk," she said, the weight of her tone unmistakable. A lump formed in Sarah's throat. Dread twisted within her as she realized this conversation would test everything, her art and her family legacies. "Okay," Sarah replied, bracing herself. The moment of confrontation had arrived, tethered to her painting and her understanding of who she was about to become. With a deep breath, Sarah opened the door, ready to face the collision of passion and obligation, prepared to fight for the space to breathe, to express, and ultimately to be herself. The moment Sarah opened the door, the weight of her mother's worried gaze seemed to intensify, as if the very air had thickened with tension. This was no simple domestic discussion. It felt like the start of an emotional excavation, a revealing of layers that had long been buried under obligation and expectation. "Mom," she began, unsure how to navigate the fragile terrain, aware that her voice trembled slightly. "What's going on?" Her mother, with furrowed brows, crossed her arms tightly as if to shield herself from what she was about to say. "I know you've been painting again. I saw your canvas," she started, glancing back as if fearful someone might overhear them. "I can't help but feel concerned." "Concerned? About what?" Sarah replied, her heart racing. A part of her wanted to dismiss her mother's unease, to push her back and insist that she was finally pursuing something that brought her joy. But deep down, she anticipated where this was headed. "Your art isn't practical, Sarah. You know how your uncle is. He's worried about your future, and so am I." Her mother's voice softened, yet the sting of her words pierced deeper still. Those whispers of doubt, the familiar echo from childhood, resonated painfully in her chest. "This isn't just about you. We have a family legacy to uphold." The idea of a legacy suffocated her. The more they clung to tradition, the more suffocating it felt. "What if this is part of my legacy? My happiness doesn't involve pleasing everyone else," she shot back, her voice rising slightly. It was a defiant spark, and with it came the realization that she was fighting not just for recognition, but for her very identity. There was a moment of tense silence where both mother and daughter stood, eyes locked, the crackling air around them thick with unspoken emotions. Sarah recognized the fear in her mother's posture. It was a fear of loss, a fear of change. Who was she now if she defied the path they envisioned for her? "I want to explore who I am beyond this," Sarah said softly, regaining her composure. "Beyond nursing, beyond your expectations." The vulnerability in her voice nearly shattered her resolve, but she pressed on. This was her chance to articulate the stirrings within her soul. Her mother appeared to wrestle with this new reality. "But what if you fail?" she pressed, stepping closer, her voice laced with genuine concern. This was a haunting question that lingered on the thresholds of Sarah's ambitions. What if she did fail? "I don't know, but what if I don't?" Sarah countered, channeling every ounce of bravery she could muster. The truth was, the fear of failing paled in comparison to the prospect of never trying, of languishing in a life that wasn't truly hers. As air filled with unspoken truths, Sarah felt her heart align with a newfound clarity. The vibrant colors from her canvas pulsed in her mind like a heartbeat, reminding her of the joy she had unearthed over the past few days. "I need to follow this, Mom, for me." In that moment, her mother's expression shifted, a flicker of understanding glimmering in her eyes. "You mean painting? Expressing yourself?" "Yes, I mean painting," Sarah affirmed, relief mixing with urgency. The path to her own truth lay bare, laden with uncertainty, but infinitely more gratifying than the shackles of obligation. Yet, just as the glimmers of reconciliation surfaced, her mother's resolve hardened. "I can't support this dream, Sarah, not if you're turning away from what we've built. You'll need to think about your choices carefully." The finality in her mother's tone was a slap in the face, a reminder that breaking free from familial ties was fraught with peril. The space that once felt liberating now seemed haunted by the ghosts of expectations. After her mother departed, Sarah sank onto her studio floor, surrounded by the remnants of her chaotic creation, grappling with the ramifications of her words. She had ignited a fire within, but faced the darkness of the storm it would conjure in her family. The dichotomy of joy and pain danced hand in hand, and she realized that every stroke on the canvas represented not just art, but her evolving identity. Determined, she rose to her feet and gazed upon the canvas, a visual manifestation of her tumultuous thoughts unspooling across the fabric. Taking a deep breath, she picked up her paintbrush again, ready to confront the shadows that her awakening had cast. Her future may be uncertain, but this journey of self-discovery was unmistakably hers to embrace. Little did she know, the very next knock on her door could either reinforce the barriers or break down the final wall standing between her self-expression and her family's fear. The moment of decision loomed on the horizon, a turning point that could redefine everything. As morning light streamed through her studio window, illuminating the swirls of color littered across her canvas, Sarah felt an unexpected energy pulse within her. The confrontation with her mother had ripped open a reservoir of emotions, each layer revealing fresh desire for authenticity. What had once been mere splashes of paint now held the whispers of her aspirations, delectable hints beckoning her to dive deeper into her passion. With newfound resolve, she decided today would mark the beginning of her exploration, not just of art, but of herself. As she set her mind to this endeavor, she grabbed her phone and scrolled through the messages from her art teacher, Miss Stanton, which had piled up over the past few weeks. Each note was filled with encouragement, reminders of opportunities to showcase work that might never see the surface if she remained anchored in the shadows of obligation. After a moment's hesitation, an impulsive decision surged within her. What if she reached out to Miss Stanton to discuss showcasing her work? Perhaps she could push boundaries and make an appearance at a local art gallery night. It was impractical, her mind whispered, but the thrill of considering it electrified her. "Okay," she murmured, feeling a flicker of joy sparking in her chest. She quickly typed out a tentative message, the words flowing with a surprising ease that felt foreign yet exhilarating. "Hi, Miss Stanton. I've been working on some pieces and would love to discuss opportunities to showcase my art at the upcoming gallery night. Let me know if you're available to chat." After hitting send, she turned her attention back to her canvas, each brushstroke grounded in her determination to reclaim her narrative. Hours slipped away as color swirled under her fingers, vibrant hues and abstract forms mirroring her internal struggle unfolded on the canvas, exercising her fears with each motion. Yet, beneath the relief of creative freedom, unease churned in the back of Sarah's mind. Doubts rose like phantoms. What if her work wasn't good enough? What if the gallery only amplified the criticisms of her mother and uncle? Each worry felt like a weight tied around her ankles, but the flame of rebellion stirred inside her stronger than the tide of anxiety. She could not allow herself to be shackled again. The occasional brush of excitement eclipsed her fears as she envisioned herself at the gallery, filling the air with the stories her colors told. But more than the art, this act would be a declaration of independence, a furious affirmation of her commitment to pursuing her passion amidst her family's resistance. Just as she immersed herself in the dance of creativity, her phone chimed, breaking through her reverie. It was a reply from Miss Stanton. "I'd love to meet and discuss your work, Sarah. How about tomorrow at 2 p.m.? The thrill surged anew, and a smile spread across her face. But beneath it lay a gnawing tension. How would she present herself, this version of her that was still raw and undefined amidst opposing expectations? A whisper of doubt tugged at her. Would Miss Stanton perceive the artist she yearned to be, or was she still seen merely as the hopeful nurse shackled to a familiar destiny? Pushing the doubts away, Sarah resolved to embrace the opportunity wholeheartedly. Her excitement intertwined with a fresh bout of fear, the push and pull of passion coursing through her veins. As she prepped for tomorrow's meeting, an uncomfortable thought flickered across her consciousness. Would her mother's words haunt her when she returned to the family sphere? Would breaking away bring about an irrevocable fracture in their relationship? Determined not to let her fears control her, Sarah decided she needed to confront her mother again. A thought danced at the edge of her mind. Perhaps it was not just about art, but about redefining family ties, working to forge a space where both her own wishes and her family's fears could intersect in a healthy dialogue. But before she could further explore this emotional territory, another knock rattled her studio door, urgent and unexpected. Her heart thudded against her chest as she stepped toward the entrance, mind racing. Who stood beyond the threshold, and what impact might they have on her burgeoning journey? The moment lay suspended, an unpredictable intersection of her past and her future, leaning toward a revelation that could unravel everything she just began to understand. As Sarah swung the door open, the figure standing in her threshold left her momentarily speechless. It was Julian, her childhood friend, whose absence after high school had left a gaping void in her life. His visiting smile held those familiar mischief and warmth, but the playful glint in his eyes hinted that he hadn't come merely to reminisce. "Hey, stranger," he said, his voice teasingly bright. "Mind if I crash your creative haven for a bit?" Instantly, a wave of nostalgia washed over her, reminding her of carefree days spent scribbling and dreaming under the open skies. Yet, beneath the excitement, a ripple of apprehension coursed through her. This was a moment she couldn't afford to waste, yet the pressure of impending decisions loomed over her like a cloud. "Sure, come in," she said, stepping aside. "I was just working on some pieces." As Julian wandered through her studio, his eyes flickered over her canvases, absorbing the essence of her unfiltered emotions sprawled on the surface. "Whoa, Sarah, this is beautiful. I've never seen this side of you." The words flowed from him like a sincere tribute to her evolution, and yet they stoked the embers of her anxiety, the fear of exposure, of judgment. "Thanks," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're a bit raw, just me experimenting." Noticing her hesitance, Julian paused, his expression shifting. "What's really going on?" he asked with a directness that made her stomach tighten. "You seem different." The question wrapped around her like a challenging embrace, leaving her no escape. Should she reveal the tumult of her internal struggle? She searched for the words, but felt their weight in her throat, stumbling over the barrier built from years of familial expectations and self-doubt. "I, have an art meeting tomorrow," she finally confessed, swallowing hard. "With Miss Stanton. I'm thinking of showcasing my work." "Showcasing?" He raised his eyebrows inquisitively. "Why does that sound like you're about to jump out of an airplane?" The analogy wasn't far from the truth. "It's terrifying, honestly. I've always kept my art private, but something shifted inside me. I want to share it." "You've got to let your art breathe, Sarah. This is a big deal. What's holding you back?" The reminder of her fears bubbled up, as vivid as the colors on her canvas. "What if it's not good enough? My mom, she doesn't believe in this. She flat out told me I should stick to nursing." For a moment, Julian remained silent, absorbing her words. "That's her issue, not yours, you know. You should be pursuing your dreams on your own terms. Maybe this is your chance to tell her you're serious about this. Face her head on." "I want that, but it's complicated," she replied, wrestling with the conflicting desires for both honesty and approval. "What if it goes wrong? What if our relationship is too broken for a conversation like that?" He leaned closer, his eyes intense, piercing through her uncertainty. "What if it's not? You won't know unless you try. You're not defined by your family's expectations. You're so much more than that." A flash of warmth ignited in her chest, bolstering her resolve. Perhaps digging into her own artistry could ignite not only her path, but a personal reckoning with her family as well. The idea left an electric thrumming in her veins, awakening her ambition. "Maybe it's time to actually stand up for myself and my art," she pondered aloud, feeling the weight of Julian's words settle into her consciousness. "Absolutely. And if you need someone to stand beside you when you do, I'm here," he encouraged, his voice steady and reassuring. The foundation beneath her began to feel less shaky. Suddenly, it wasn't merely about art. It was about carving a new identity, one that wasn't tied to the expectations that had for so long dictated her existence. Determined, she made up her mind. Tomorrow's meeting would be a turning point, one she couldn't walk away from without declaring her truth. With Julian's support echoing in her heart, she took a deep breath, ready to embrace her future. As the evening deepened and light faded from the studio, she could almost see the threads of her dreams weaving together before her. Yet a stray thought struck her. What would her mother think when confronted? The emotional reckoning awaited, promising to shape the future she dared to claim. Sarah realized that tomorrow held not just the meeting, but the potential to unlock the conversation she had been avoiding for too long. The idea of confrontation sent a tremor of uncertainty through her. But the underlying fear was now intertwined with a flicker of hope, propelling her forward into uncharted territories. The door of her studio remained open, echoing with infinite possibilities. With the weight of fate pressing upon her, Sarah's mind danced between anticipation and anxiety, leading her toward tomorrow's uncharted turbulence. Would she summon the courage to redefine both her art and her family ties? As the darkness enveloped the studio, the answer loomed tantalizingly out of reach. The sun rose the next morning, casting a warm glow into Sarah's studio, illuminating the countless canvases that bore the turmoil and triumph of her spirit. As she prepared for her meeting with Miss Stanton, anxiety bubbled beneath her skin, tightening her chest as anticipation mingled with self-doubt. She tried to push the thoughts away, quickly sifting through her work, bringing out pieces she felt represented her rawest emotions. Yet memories of the conversation with Julian replayed in her mind, his words echoing through the uncertainty. "You're so much more than that." Was it true? Buried beneath layers of familial expectations and societal norms, she had begun to sense flickers of the artist within her seeking expression. Could she really stand tall when faced with opposition? The weight of that question felt heavier than the paintbrushes in her hand. With a deep breath, she turned toward her to-do list for the day, scribbles of reminders intermingled with affirmations she had scrawled from a late-night burst of inspiration. It read, "Today, I stand for my art. Today, I fight for me." It seemed so simple, yet the complexity of emotions gripped her heart. She glanced down at the clock. Time was slipping away. After a quick exhale, she set her brushes aside and dressed carefully, choosing her favorite shirt, a spectrum of colors that mirrored her art. It felt emblematic of her journey, a statement of her intention to embrace her vibrant identity. As she slipped the shirt on, a sense of determination began to seep in. The ride to the gallery felt endless, her heart racing as she envisioned Miss Stanton's reaction to her work. Would she see the passion pouring onto the canvases, or would she just see a novice still chasing fleeting dreams? What if her mother's skepticism loomed larger during the meeting instead of fading? The conflicting emotions of hope and dread created a tight knot in her stomach. Arriving at the gallery, she stepped inside, her feet dragging slightly as they seemed to resist crossing the threshold. The scent of polished hardwood and fresh paint enveloped her, both intimidating and familiar. Sarah could see Miss Stanton, a woman with an air of confidence that seemed almost palpable. Taking a moment to collect herself, Sarah methodically reviewed the pieces she intended to present, fine-tuning the stories behind each one in her mind. "Sarah," Miss Stanton greeted, her smile warm yet professional. "I was looking forward to our meeting." "Me too," Sarah managed to reply, her voice barely rising above a whisper as she pointed toward her work displayed in the small gallery space. As Julian had encouraged, she began to share the narrative driving her creations. Moments of vulnerability, resilience, and self-realization painted meticulously into each canvas. She felt the walls of her self-imposed restraints beginning to crumble with every explanation, her passion shining through the doubt. Miss Stanton leaned closer, studying each piece intensely. "These are powerful, Sarah. You have a unique voice that demands to be heard." The praise ignited a spark deep within her. Was this truly happening? But then it hit her, the uncertainty that had been gnawing at her ever since stepping into the gallery. Would Miss Stanton's endorsement mean more than her mother's disapproval? Her breath hitched as the thought rang hollow in her mind, challenging her resolve. The moment hung heavily between them, as silence enveloped the space. Sarah was poised at a crossroads, to continue forging her own identity or retreat back to the safety of the familiar. Amidst the tension, she could feel her heart pounding, enticing her to finally address the shadow that had lingered for so long. The confrontation with her mother weighed ever heavier in the balance. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah's voice trembled as she took the leap. "Have you ever had to defy someone you love to pursue your passion?" Miss Stanton's expression shifted, recognizing the deeper question embedded in her inquiry, gazing intently into Sarah's eyes. The air saturated with anticipation, both for the answer that was about to unveil and the consequences it would bring, the emotional weights that were waiting to be disentangled. What would Miss Stanton reveal? And would Sarah find the courage to take this leap not only into the art world, but beyond into her own destiny? The answers awaited, teasing the edge of her transformation and threatening the foundations of her greatest fears. Miss Stanton's gaze turned thoughtful, her expression shifting to one that clearly conveyed understanding born from experience. "You know," she began slowly, measuring her words as if they carried the weight of countless similar encounters. "Art can often act as a mirror. When we create, we confront parts of ourselves, including the relationships that shape us." Sarah felt a rush of emotions. Her curiosity piqued as she suppressed the urge to interject. This conversation was moving in a direction she desperately needed. It was about more than just her art. "There was a time," Miss Stanton continued, "when I had to choose between pursuing my dreams or adhering to my family's expectations. Everyone believed I should follow a stable path, but I felt that fire within me." A flicker of determination lit within Sarah. Here was a seasoned artist, someone who had navigated the turbulent waters she currently faced. "Did you defy them?" Sarah asked, her voice more resolute now. The question escaped her before she could doubt herself. Every ounce of her being hungered for honesty in this moment. Miss Stanton smiled sadly, almost wistfully. "Yes, I did. It was the hardest decision I ever had to make. But in returning to my roots as an artist, I found freedom. My family was initially disappointed, but over time, they began to understand my passion, a process that taught me so much about love and acceptance." Sarah processed the revelation, the words resonating with her more than she expected. Instead of retreating into fear, she felt a small pivot in her perspective. Perhaps, like Miss Stanton, she could find a way to break free without severing ties completely. The complexities of family bonds held a certain web of possibilities, too. What if they never understand? The question slipped out, tinged with vulnerability. She couldn't shake the looming specter of her mother's disapproval. "Sarah," Miss Stanton urged, her tone firm yet gentle, "the journey of understanding often takes time. The important part is that you believe in yourself and your art. Even if they don't understand now, your pursuit speaks volumes, especially if you stay true to it." The warmth of Miss Stanton's reassurance wrapped around Sarah like a comforting embrace. As she stood in the gallery, each piece behind her felt more transformative and vital than before. They weren't merely canvases. Each one was a testament to her fight, documenting her evolution. "Can I ask you a follow-up question?" Sarah ventured, a new confidence igniting within her. "Of course," Miss Stanton replied, encouragingly. "Do you think it's possible to keep pursuing my art while also navigating my family's expectations? I love them, but their vision for my life feels suffocating." Miss Stanton nodded slowly. "That's the complexity of love. You must prioritize your own happiness while also learning to communicate your needs clearly and compassionately. By doing so, you might encourage them to see you for who you truly are." The thought reverberated in Sarah's mind, sparking a sense of empowerment. What if she could redefine her relationship with her family? What if her art could serve as a bridge rather than a divide? She needed to be brave, to articulate her truth without resorting to bitterness or rebellion. "You've given me so much to think about," Sarah admitted, a genuine smile emerging as she felt the weight begin to lift, even if just slightly. "Remember, Sarah," Miss Stanton advised as she began to gather her things, "each brushstroke you make on the canvas is a reaffirmation of your identity. Embrace it in your conversations, too. After the meeting, Sarah stepped out into the sunlight, feeling lighter, empowered by the revelations exchanged within the gallery walls. Her intuition told her this was only the beginning of her journey, one where personal clarity would wield its own kind of art, transcending paint and canvas. As she walked back to her studio, Sarah's heartbeat syncopated with renewed purpose. The thought of confronting her mother no longer felt paralyzing. She could approach it not as an act of rebellion, but as a conversation for connection and understanding. The canvas of her life was not only painted in her decisions, but could also include the rich hues of her familial history. But as she turned the corner toward her studio, doubt crept back in. What if her mother dismissed her dreams outright? What if their conversation spiraled into conflict instead of understanding? The fear lingered like a shadow, a reminder of the task ahead. Despite the uplifting conversation with Miss Stanton, Sarah felt a cold fear sneak back in, feeding her apprehension. Would confronting her mother risk everything she hoped to achieve? The paths before her were intricate and entwined, leaving her standing on the precipice of uncertainty. The time had come. She would have to confront the very heart of her struggle, her mother, and perhaps redefine both her art and her identity in the process. What words would she choose to convey her desires? Would vulnerability win out, or would the old patterns resurface, trapping her once more? The answers hovered, both thrilling and terrifying, as she prepared to take a step that could shape her relationship with art and her family forever. The walls of Sarah's studio loomed around her, an intimate sanctuary turned battleground. Paintings lined the space, vibrant expressions of her thoughts and feelings, and yet they felt heavy today. Each canvas echoing her internal struggle as if they were aware of the confrontation ahead. Finding the right words weighed on her mind like a burden, but the notion of compromise began to illuminate new strategies. Suddenly, she inhaled deeply and reached for a blank canvas, her fingers brushing against the smooth surface. She brushed in a few strokes of blue, allowing the color to represent her hopes, then layered in streaks of gray, capturing her fears. It was a cathartic endeavor, a diversion that reminded her of Miss Stanton's words. She needed to embrace her identity. What if this painting could help crystallize her thoughts? Through the art, she could explore her own voice. The idea sparked a renewed energy. Maybe this canvas could serve as a way to visually communicate her emotions before she verbalized them. As she painted, the minutes melded into an hour. The initial strokes poured out her anxiety, transitioning effortlessly into the bold declaration of her aspirations. Each hue she layered was a part of her, intermingled with her wild ambition and the voice of doubt that whispered from familial expectation. As colors intermingled, the emotional tension began to dissolve. What if she expressed her feelings in art before approaching her mother? It might make her intentions clearer and provide an avenue for openness. There was a possibility that her mother would respond to the visual conversation better than the spoken one. Just as inspiration struck, a knock on the door pulled Sarah from her thoughts. Her heart raced. It could be a distraction, or it could be an opportunity. "Hey, Sarah, it's Emily. Got a minute?" Emily, her best friend and fellow artist, burst through the doorway, enthusiasm radiating from her. "I felt your energy shift from down the street. You've been working, haven't you?" "Just trying to process some things," Sarah admitted, dipping her brush into a bright yellow, highlighting a section of her canvas. "So, how's it going with your mom?" Emily asked, settling down beside her, the supportive presence grounding yet fortifying. "I'm figuring it out," she said, glancing at her painting. "I think I need to show her instead of trying to explain everything with words. Painting has always been easier, you know." Emily leaned closer, her eyes studying the canvas. "It's beautiful, Sarah. You're capturing something really special here. Have you thought about sharing the whole process with her? Let her see how important art is to you." The suggestion resonated deeply. If she were to engage her mother through the act of creation, it might offer her a chance to rebuild their connection without the heavy weight of expectation. Presenting her work as a narrative could allow her mother to witness her journey. Yes, the clarity burst forth, igniting Sarah's spirit. I could show her this. Let her watch me create. It would be my story unfolding in front of her. But what if she criticizes it? Emily's eyebrows knitted in concern. What if she doesn't react how you hope? The chill of that thought brushed against Sarah's resolve, but she steeled herself against it. That reality is part of the risk I need to take. I have to be vulnerable if I want this to work. With newfound determination simmering within her, Sarah realized that the act of creating could be just as powerful as the art itself. This approach might open a pathway that words alone could never achieve. It wasn't just about art. It was about redefining her identity within this familial relationship. Armed with paintbrushes and her evolving narrative, Sarah began to plan the conversation more strategically. Her heart raced with anticipation, a mixture of excitement and dread spilling over into her art. As the sun dipped below the horizon, blanketing her studio in twilight, she looked over her work, illuminated in the fading light. Tomorrow would come with its own challenges, but instead of facing them cradling apprehension, she would embrace their complexity through creation. The time had come for the confrontation she had anticipated, and she would approach it armed not just with words, but with a canvas full of truth. Would her mother finally see the woman she'd become through her art, or would misunderstanding continue to stand between them like a shadow? Those questions were potent, and as Sarah stood amidst her vibrant canvases, she realized that perhaps the most significant depth of conflict lay not just outside her, but in the layers yet to be discovered within. The urge to paint consumed her as new ideas rippled through her consciousness. Would the artwork reveal what remained hidden about her own spirit? As dawnlight crept into the studio, Sarah found herself at the threshold of a monumental day. The aroma of fresh paint hung tangibly in the air, mingling with her rising sense of purpose. She woke with a singular vision: to transform her canvas into a bridge, a merger of her complexity and her mother's expectations. The weight of the conversation she was about to initiate felt heavy but empowering, as if every brushstroke could delineate the essence of her very being. With a burgeoning fervor, Sarah prepped her materials and prepared for what she felt would be both vulnerable and revolutionary. She set the blank canvas on the easel, its crisp surface ready to absorb her narrative. The colors danced in her mind: greens for hope, reds for passion, violets for questions unanswered. They reflected the intricate tapestry of feelings she was eager to untangle in front of her mother. Tracing the brush over the canvas, she began to give life to the images swirling within her thoughts. Each stroke was like unlocking a secret door to her identity, revealing layers of herself that had remained concealed. She poured her heart into the creating process. The colors morphed into a vivid representation of her journey, a map of the artist's transformation from uncertainty to self-assurance. With every passing moment, something within her solidified. This was not merely about seeking approval. It was about opening a dialogue through the language of art. Lost in her creation, Sarah became acutely aware of how her emotions translated into visual language. Each hue felt like a subtitle to her story, a narrative she was finally ready to show. But vulnerability threatened at the edges. What if her mother saw things differently? What if she couldn't see Sarah beyond the brushstrokes? These questions simmered beneath her focus. The looming confrontation with her mother felt like a storm brewing. Sarah couldn't ignore the possibility of pushback, nor should she dismiss her mother's legacy of expectations that lay heavily upon her shoulders. And yet, this moment wasn't just about her mother's response. It was about reclaiming her own narrative, about setting a precedent of authenticity in every aspect of her life. As she painted, a distinct realization crystallized. Her work could simmer in the tension between the past and her future. This was more than just a painting, it was a declaration. Thoughts of how her mother might respond flickered through her mind. Would she empathize with the vibrant chaos of colors, or would she dismiss it as childish folly? Regardless, Sarah's commitment was solidifying. Hours melted away in the fervor of creation until the sun claimed a rightful place in the sky, pouring light onto the canvas and her heart. The painting stood before her, an honest portrayal of her internal landscape, the questions of her identity bubbling to the surface among the colors. With each passing glance, she felt her resolve strengthen. She was ready to take that leap into vulnerability. Her heart raced as she stretched and prepared for the moment she had contemplated for so long. Outside her sanctuary, the world buzzed with normalcy, but within her, a tempest of emotions churned, a mixture of fear, hope, and determination. She felt like an artist on the verge of unveiling their masterpiece to a world that might not be ready. Then the decisive thought struck her. As daunting as it felt, she would not just present a painting, she would offer a piece of herself. It was more than an artwork, it was a key to understanding who she was becoming. With the sun setting on her initial fears and the horizon signaling a new beginning, Sarah stepped outside her studio, brimming with unvoiced words and unexpressed emotions. Today's confrontation was not merely about painting or her mother, but about the empowerment of embracing every facet of her journey, the vulnerability, the strength, the resolve. What awaited her beyond that door? Would her mother grasp the importance of this artistic revelation, or would she dismiss it altogether? The uncertainty tugged at Sarah's mind, a manifestation of the very questions she intended to confront. As she approached the threshold to engage her mother, she braced herself for the moment that could redefine everything she thought she knew. As Sarah approached her mother, heart pounding in her chest like a drum signifying change, the vibrant canvas she had created burned in her thoughts. This was her moment, the culmination of countless hours spent wresting her identity free from the confines of family expectation, and she needed her mother to see the depth of her evolution through the lens of her art. "Mom, can we talk?" she began, hesitantly yet firmly, crossing the threshold into the warmth of their family kitchen. It was a cozy space, filled with the aroma of baked goods and the mundane comfort of togetherness, but today it felt charged with new possibility. Her mother looked up from the table, surprised by the weight behind Sarah's tone. "Of course, honey, what's on your mind?" As the moment hung above them, Sarah could feel the pulse of anxiety mingling with determination within her. This was not just a talk about her passion, it was a declaration of her existence. "I've been painting again," she said, gauging her mother's reaction. The unease in her mother's demeanor twisted like a vine around Sarah's heart, but she pressed on, raising her chin with newfound resolve. "I want to show you something," she continued, fighting the instinct to retreat into her previous self, the dutiful daughter always seeking approval. "It's more than just a canvas. It's everything I've been feeling." With surprising agility, her mother got up, curiosity mingling with apprehension in her expression. "Show me," she said cautiously, leading the way as they walked to the studio. As Sarah stood in front of her masterpiece, chest tightening with both pride and fear, she invited her mother to look closely. Each color was a brush of experience. Each stroke encapsulated a memory, a struggle, a release, a visible map of her internal world. "This is me. The colors reflect not just my art, but who I am beyond the responsibilities I've carried for so long." Her mother studied the painting intently, silence stretching between them as she absorbed each facet. Shadows of doubt remained, yet Sarah felt a shift in the room, a gentle hum of recognition. "It's vibrant," her mother finally said, her voice tinged with softness. "You've always had a way with color, but—" she paused, searching for the right words. "I don't understand why it has to be this." The moment felt volatile, like a strike of lightning threatening to crash down, but Sarah stood still, refusing to let fear dictate her response. Once again, her fingers brushed against the canvas as she spoke from the heart. Art is my voice, Mom. It allows me to heal, to express everything I've repressed, and to be authentically me. I can't keep hiding behind the roles I've been given." The air hung thick with emotion, the weight of unspooled thoughts hanging between them. As Sarah leaned into her vulnerability, she sensed the shift. Her mother's guard began to lower. "I understand," Sarah continued. "It's about the legacy of creativity that Grandma spoke of, the one I've ignored for so long. I want to embrace that legacy, not just for myself, but for us." There was an intensity as her mother's gaze moved from the painting to Sarah's face, and for the first time, Sarah didn't just feel seen, she felt understood. "I just worry about your future," her mother whispered, grappling with a torrent of emotions. "What will others think? What if you don't get a real job?" "Mom," Sarah responded gently, emotion swelling. "This isn't just a whim. I've realized pursuing my passion is just as valid as any career. It doesn't have to be a choice between art and family. I can be both, an artist and still part of this family." Tears glistened in her mother's eyes, and she stepped closer, her voice trembling with uncertainty and hope. "I don't want to lose you." "You won't. You'll gain me," Sarah reassured, her heart swelling with determination as she extended her hands, inviting connection. "This journey isn't meant to divide us. Will you join me in understanding this part of me? My art can reflect who we are together." In that moment, as the walls of expectation began to crumble around them, her mother's response lingered in the air like sweet nectar. Slowly, with tentative hands, her mother traced a fingertip along the edges of the canvas, feeling the emotion seep through the paint. "Okay," her mother finally conceded, her voice more steady. "Show me your world. Help me understand." The change of heart washed over Sarah like a soothing balm, reigniting her spirit. The fear that had once gripped her loosened, making room for empathy and mutual growth. They stood side by side, enveloped by the kaleidoscope of colors, a bridge built through understanding. "I will," Sarah promised, her own conviction imbued with newfound strength. "We can redefine our legacy together." With each brushstroke her mother admired, Sarah felt the path to personal achievement unfolding. Her passion respected and embraced, her identity genuine, and a shared journey blossoming before them. She had conquered her fears, and now, with her art as a medium, they could carve out a new narrative together. Sarah stepped back, her heart swelling with gratitude and fulfillment. The canvas was no longer just a reflection of her struggle. It was a testament to transformation, not only her own, but of her family as well. As light poured in through the studio window, painting the room in warm hues, Sarah realized she had not only achieved a personal renaissance, but had begun to pave the way for collective understanding and acceptance. In that space, she embraced a solid confidence, now more than an artist. A voice claimed, a legacy reshaped. This was her moment of triumph. It was time to celebrate her journey, the fusion of art and family, and with it, Sarah knew she had achieved the most vital aspect of her growth, honoring her truth while anchoring it in love. If you've experienced any part of Sarah's transformative journey today, this is your moment to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories as they unfold just like Sarah's. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support is crucial for bringing these rich narratives to life. Comment below with your reactions and theories about the ending. Your voice matters. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share.